to A Well-Designed Business. My name is Luann Nigara, and I'm so glad you found this podcast. Together with my husband Vince and our partner Bill, we have grown our company WindowWorks from the ground up. So I know and I understand the challenges you face in running your interior design business. I also know that your talent alone isn't enough to ensure your success. So on this podcast, we talk about strategies and practical steps to help you grow your business. But make no mistake about it, we have our share of fun here too, mixed in with those aha moments that I love so much. This isn't fluff. Nobody has time for that. Whether you are a new interior designer or a seasoned designer, I am here to help you create and to manage the kind of interior design firm that you dream of. It's straight talk and it's action. Are you ready? Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of A Well-Designed Business. It's Power Talk Friday, and I'm very happy to let you know that one of my favorite Power Talk Friday experts is back with us today, Kimberly Merlitti. I have to tell you, if you missed Kimberly's first episode on the show, it was episode number 361. And so if you've missed it, you're going to listen to the show and then you're immediately going to go to 361 because there are moments on the podcast where people blow my mind. And that's exactly what Kimberly did. And I'm going to tell you why she did. Because, look, most of us are not well versed in the finances and the financial part of our business. Let's be real. It's no secret that the gig is up, okay? But just like another one of my favorites, Michelle Williams, and just like another of my favorites, Peter Lang, Kimberly has a way of helping us understand this very, very important aspect of our business, but talking to us in a language that is not gobbledygook. You know what I mean? I cannot tell you how much I appreciate when somebody who understands something so easily and so to their core and is still able to express it in a way that is, number one, not talking down, and number two, not making assumptions on our level of comprehension, that they are really willing to go the extra mile to make the analogies and make the examples things that we can understand. And that is what I get when I speak with Kimberly about finances. And so I know how valuable it is. I know how many of you do not have a VIN man that has your back and really make sure that all of the finances are buttoned up, and the buck stops with you. And it is very, very important that if the buck does stop with you, that you get yourself help in understanding this important part. Because otherwise, if you're not making money, you know what I say, it's a hobby. It's a darn hobby, and it could be a really enjoyable one. But if your decision is that this is your business, then you need to lock down the pretty and the finances. So we have Kimberly Merlitti back. If you missed that first episode, I'm going to give you a little information on her. She owns KMM Consulting. She's based out of Washington, D.C. When we first met her, she was living on the West Coast. She has spent 20 years working in accounting for companies such as Swinnerton Builders, the WRNS Studio, and Martin Group. She has her master's in accounting from Golden Gate University. And her clientele includes a diverse group of service-based companies. You see that little word right there? Service-based companies. You see, that's a trigger. When I read that, I'm like, oh, she's used to dealing with companies that don't necessarily exchange product, but they exchange service and consults and intellectual property. I always feel it's important that we deal with experts that understand our business, okay? But more than that, she has a focus on small interior design, construction, and architectural firms. You know how I feel about that. I love our people, and I love when the people outside our people love our people, okay? So, and the goal of her firm is to make the businesses that she works for as profitable as they can be, and her secondary goal is to help us and educate us on accounting, cash flow management, tax deductions, project reporting, and business management, because you can that whole thing, like you can teach a man to fish or you can give him fish every day, right? And so Kimberly is the person, one more of these experts, like I said, with Peter and Michelle and others that are interested in teaching us to understand so that we're an active partner in our finances. So Kim, welcome to the show again. My hat's off to you. You know, I adore what you do and the way you do it. Thank you so much for coming back to A Well-Designed Business.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for having me. I love that. You're so sweet to me.
Well, I don't say it if I don't mean it, lady.
That's you're making me blush over here.
Yeah. I could simply introduce you, or I could tell them how I feel about you. There's two things. So here's the thing. What we're going to do, you emailed me and you asked me, what did I think about this topic? And the topic is cash position. Do you know how much money is actually yours? And I love this topic because if I had a nickel for every time the VIN man said to me when I said, hey, you know, this happened and this sponsor and this sale, and he's like, Lou, let's sit down and talk about how much is actually ours. So I have this conversation monthly with my husband, and I appreciate it. And I appreciate that, you know, I have certainly learned a lot from him, but I always say I'm insanely lucky to have this, you know, at my dinner table conversation. And so others that don't have this, Kim, they need people like you to help us get through it. So I love this conversation. You know, do we actually know how much money is ours? So get us started. What do you mean by that, Kim?
Well, I want to make it as basic as possible. So when I did this presentation in High Point this year, it wasn't a very long presentation, but it's simple math. All you want to do, and your cash is a picture in time. We know on a daily basis our bank accounts are going up and down, up and down. What we need to understand is why they're going up and down like that. So let's just use an example. I have 200 grand in the bank. I'm feeling pretty rich and all high on my horse. Well, we need to make sure we understand where that 200 grand eventually needs to go. Now, a portion of it could be yours, but I ask every client I have in every presentation I do at events, I say, do you know how much of that money is yours? And they all look at me with deer in the headlights. I mean, they look, and it's fear. And I say, okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to show you how to do this simple calculation. And it is very simple. And I want everyone to understand that it is the simple. So I'm counting on you, Luann, to poke holes in my story and make sure the right questions are asked, because I want to make sure this makes sense. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I want to get this out there, because during the summertime, businesses start to slow and we start to spend money, and then we hit a rough patch eventually, and we don't want to hit that rough patch with lack of information.
Okay. Well, you can count on me.
Yeah. So let's use our example. Let's just do basic calculations, everybody. 200 grand in your bank. What are the bills that you normally pay? Let's name a few of the ones everybody knows about, and then we're going to go through the ones that are forgotten.
Okay.
The ones I know everybody's familiar with are their credit card bills and any loans or lines of credit or auto loans that they may have. Sales tax is sometimes on the radar of my designers, and depending on what state it's dependent on when it's paid out. So make sure you research that in your independent state. One thing that is always forgotten, probably 80% of the time when I talk to my clients, is what we call the vendor liability. So let's break that down. Vendor liability is basically the money owed to a vendor for a certain product. So if I have a sofa and my client pays me 10 grand, I turn around to my vendor and pay them, let's say, $4,000 to get started on that sofa. So the remaining balance, let's say, of that sofa is $4,000, but it's not due for, let's say, 12 weeks when the sofa is complete. Do you know that $4 grand is sitting in your bank account waiting to be paid in 12 weeks? I think that is the number one thing that people forget. So what we do with my clients, and when I speak on this, is I say, make sure you have a software that you're using that helps you project what that remaining vendor amount that needs to be paid and when it needs to be paid. And that, in definition, is what we call a vendor liability.
Can I ask you something here?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so and I take you at your word because I know that you have, if you had not done, if I was not aware that you had done several live presentations of this, I would think, okay, you're sitting in your office, Kim, and you are making this assumption. So I'm going to take you at your word because I know you've done it live. I find it hard to believe that as challenged as I know I personally am about, the finances and the balance statement and sheet and all that other stuff, that how 80% forget the liability of cost of goods? I mean, that seems like the most obvious to me.
If I were the most obvious, I wouldn't have a profession.
Yeah, it's just funny.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
that's
is.
just funny to
And
me. I mean,
what
like
I,
that's the one physical thing. Like I know
yeah,
that when I talk and coach with designers, sometimes they will not consider the car loan as part of it, or they will not consider, they will, like you, to your point, they'll forget the sales tax and stuff like that. But anyway, and of course I don't do coaching on finances. It's like a top view discussion if they're in crisis, and I'll be like, look, here's the top 5 things you got to do, and then get yourself to somebody to help you, right? But anyway, I just find it hard to believe. And so, but I do believe it because I know that you are boots on the ground. You see, when somebody's boots on the ground, talking, dealing, coaching, then I know what you're finding is happening in your reporting. So hello, everybody out there. You cost of goods, right? Cost of goods.
yeah,
Come on.
cost
Okay.
of goods. And to your point that they may be aware that it's there, but they never know what the fiscal impact. And let's put that in layman terms. They don't know the dollar value.
Okay.
Like if they know it exists, they'll come to me and go, Kim, I need help. I know I have this vendor liability, but I have no way of quantifying it.
Okay.
So that could be why that is a shock to you, because maybe you talk to your clients and you're like, oh, they know it's there, but they won't admit they don't know the number.
Understood. Okay.
And
understood.
when I work with them, I say, do we know this number? And they'll just be either silence on the phone, or they'll be like, no, that's why I'm calling you, Kimberly.
Hello.
Yeah, like there, I can see the Italian hands go up in the air, like, that's why I'm calling. So, just to give a visual. Italian, so what I say to them is I then go to them and I say, what software are you using? And then depending on the answer, I know pretty much every software out there. And believe it or not, I'm actually getting up to speed on my Doma and really liking it. So
my Doma Studio. Yeah. And they just added QuickBooks 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago at the point of that this is going on the air. And so that is a major game changer for my Doma users.
Yeah. So I'm excited to get up to speed and use all the softwares that I do use. I try to find a method for quantifying what the remaining balance is on those vendor amounts. And I'm going to put this in here because I think this is really important. This is something I just started in the last year. Is I've started installation prep work where I'll sit and go over cash flow once a month with my clients, and I'll say, when are your next installations? When are they? And then they'll say, oh, Kim, they're in August, and now we're in June. And I'd say, okay, let's run a ledger to see what you have to install, because most likely you'll have to pay money out to get that stuff delivered on time. That is also a fiscal, that's going to hit your cash flow.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean you're not making money. It just means your cash is going to have to take that hit all at one time.
Well, and two, to be fair, don't you, look, we still need to quantify it. We still need to have it on our radar. We still need to see it in black and white in our ledger. But aren't you a proponent that the designer invoices their client for their final balance before they then issue and the balance to the vendor and then set up that installation, right?
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Okay.
I 100% agree with you on that.
Okay, good.
Because of cash flow, but the thing is that some of the cash flow in a business comes through by time billing. So if you're doing an installation and you're paying all this money out, even though you get the invoices in, you could be in a low in your cash point. And that could be a 3-day period in your week where your cash takes a dip and then goes back up.
Right.
So the idea is just to keep an eye on that. And some of my clients I've taught this method to, and they've taken on themselves and they do it daily. And the others call me every week and say, can you do this for me? I just need to make sure I'm okay. So
because until you have feeling confidence in understanding what you're doing, it's baby steps. It's riding a tricycle and then riding a two-wheeler. You know, the goal is to get to the two-wheeler, but we're okay with the tricycle and the training wheels until we get there.
Yeah. And so I do feel that this is a visual process. So Leanne, I gave you a PowerPoint before this discussion. I would be open to giving that to anyone listening to this because I really believe that it's a visual learning. I am a visual learner. So I know other people are like, I understand what Kimberly's talking about, but I need something I can read and do my own math on.
That's awesome.
So I'm hoping that everyone can read this PowerPoint and kind of get a general understanding, but let's just go through the general calculations. So you have, let's back to our example, you have 200 grand in your bank and you subtract your credit card, any loan amounts, your vendor liability, which we just went over, and your sales tax. Then you have what's called your monthly nut, is what I like to call it, of your overhead expenditures that hit every month, regardless of how much work you have. Let's say your monthly nut is 20 grand. So then you want to take that out. And this is the example I want to give to everyone. I always say to my clients, let's pretend we're shutting down our business today and moving to a foreign country. I always like to say France because I like the food. So let's say we're going to shut it all down, move to France with our husband and our kids. How much are we going to have in our pocket? That's the analysis I want you to go through when you're doing this calculation. So you pay 1 month of overhead, you pay your vendor liability, you pay your sales tax, your credit cards from this 200 grand. Now, I would give 20 points or $20 to whoever can answer this next question. What am I missing? The most important thing that I think everyone they forget if they don't have a really good CPA is their estimated tax payments. Those happen 4 times a year. But you want to set money aside for these estimated payments. Otherwise, if you get to April 15th and you haven't done these payments, you're going to owe a lot of money.
Right.
Okay. So it's important to understand that after you subtract all these like work in progress, vendor liability, your monthly net amount, that you subtract your tax payments, your estimated payment for the next period. And then you can get what's called cash on hand. And then as a little plus, I look at the accounts receivable, and let's say my accounts receivable is 50 grand. Then I add that and say, if I collect all this before I go to France, this is how much it'll be. So cash on hand is what I call it after subtracting everything I just listed and adding in accounts receivable. That is usually what I say, okay, this is our cash on hand. And then if our AR is fairly large, we want to find out why we haven't collected all that money, depending on how your business is doing. We want to make sure that people aren't behind in their payments. So doing this process over with my clients literally takes 5 minutes.
Okay.
And I have clients that look forward to this process every single month. They're like, oh, can we do my cash on hand? Because I want to know what I have in the bank. I'm not moving to France, but I just want to know. So, and some of them are ready with their numbers when they call me, and I just get all excited because it makes them fully aware of their number. And then when you look at the historical cash on hand over, let's say we've been doing this a year, you can see the fluctuations in cash. And you start to see patterns and you learn about your money. And I think it's a really good tool. I think a lot of people are in the dark about how much money is coming in and out of their business. And I think it really helps.
Right. Well, you know what I do? It's so funny when I do a presentation and I talk about if you're keeping an eye on your finances or not, and if you're being profitable, I say, you can be in the money laundering business if you want. There's so many businesses that are. They just take it in 1 month, write it out the next, take it in, and they have either none of it or very little of it stays in the checkbook. And or you have no idea what is actually yours, that you're just accepting and writing and receiving and writing and receiving and writing. And it's to your point, when you tell me that you have clients, designers that are wanting to every single month do my cash on hand in an excited way, I know what that is. That is power. That is knowledge. That is, I get this. And so that when I come this month, maybe it's 22,000. When I come next month, it's 15. And maybe when I come the following month, we figure out it's 48,000. But the fact of the matter is knowing what it is such a great feeling.
Yeah. And then I always get the question, can we do my cash on hand because I wanted to redo my website and it's going to cost 10 grand.
Right. It's a smart way to look at things.
Yeah,
do I actually have the money to do the website?
Yeah.
Or do I need to wait another week or 2 weeks or 2 months or whatever? Or I have to plan for it, right?
Yeah. Photo shoots are another one. They want to, because photo shoots can be anywhere. I've seen them anywhere from 2,500 to 15 grand, depending on the size. And they're like, I don't know if I can spend 15 grand right now. And I'm honest with them. I'm like, well, look at your cash on hand. Do you think? And they answer the question on their own. Right. And, it gives them the power. And a lot of times, I have to be honest, the cash on hand sometimes in the negative and it freaks them out. Yeah. But before I start the process, I say, be aware that just because it's in the negative doesn't mean you're going to go under. Right. It means now you understand your numbers and I'll show you the areas that you need to improve on to get this in the positive. So there's so many things to be learned by just doing this 5 minutes every month. Right. It's amazing. Yeah.
Okay. I love it. So the thing is, where do we go from here? Like, we are really, what you're saying is that we're going to first make a list of our credit card bills, our loans, our auto loans, our sales tax, our, the monthly nut. I call that, Vinny calls that the cost to be open number, right?
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, the fixed expenses. He also calls it, like, we don't make a penny until we hit this number, everybody. So hello, it's the 20th of the month.
I like that too.
Yes. Yeah. It was funny because I have to tell you, Alinda Morris was on the show and she heard your episode, your first episode, 361, about billable hours and what it really is. That was such a powerful episode. And she told me how she listened to that episode and she decided to get real with what are the minimum number of billable hours that she needs to do each week in order to cover her cost to be open number. Right. And so it was very powerful, that her experience of paying attention, which is what you're saying to do, to pay attention, because she said that she understood by doing this that, and I love the way she phrased it. This is where I'm going. So Vinny calls it the cost to be open number. You call it your monthly nut. And what she said was she learned that she needs to bill 14.4 hours a week to cover her cost to be open number. And she said, and I learned that any week that I don't bill that, I'm borrowing from myself.
She's right.
Isn't that so powerful?
That makes me goosebumpy.
I know. Yeah. I was like, it's so true. You're just borrowing. She goes, I'm borrowing from my family's family vacation fund. I'm borrowing from our mortgage payment fund. Like, I'm borrowing from myself.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
I love that. Yeah. Yeah. It's all about time management.
It is. And it comes from knowledge is the point. It comes from knowledge as opposed to, I know that we all as entrepreneurs, we work very hard. And there are times when we just feel like we need a tiny reward, right? It's like when you sometimes just want a little chocolate Hershey kiss. It's like, you're not having the whole Twix bar, but you sure love to have that piece of chocolate, right? And so I understand as an entrepreneur, there are times when you might just be like Alinda and say, you know what? It's an hour. I'm going to go for a kayak ride. I deserve it. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. This will refresh me. And then we start to say things like, just think how more productive I'll be when I do this and blah, blah, blah. But when we do it out of, not of knowledge, then I know for a fact when we get up from our desk and we do something that we quote unquote are telling ourselves is good for us overall, is good for us as a person, is good for us to be productive as a business person, when we don't do it from a point of knowledge, there is this little part, I believe, that we have one tiny little bit less of enjoyment of the process because we're out there and we're like, no, I deserve it. I've worked hard. Should I be doing this? Like, whereas if you do it like Alinda does, does. And you're like, you know what? I'm at 6 hours. It's middle of Tuesday and I've got, 8 more hours scheduled over Thursday and Friday. Heck yeah. Now that's a joyful kayak ride. Right?
Yeah. I actually schedule time to watch the Women's World Cup games, and I make sure I'm still billable at the other parts of my week,
right,
so that I can make up for those hours.
See, that's it. And you enjoy them fully, as opposed to I should be working now, but I really love this. And we all have that voice in our head. That's the thing. And it's what is your voice saying? Is your voice saying, you really shouldn't be doing this? Or is your voice saying, I'm so glad you planned for this because you're enjoying this as much as I am? So anyway, I wanted to share that because that was an outgrowth of your episode. So good on you.
That's great. It makes me happy to hear stories like that.
Yeah. So where do we go next in this, pulling back the curtain on our finances? What's the next thing that you do in the next step with your clients?
Well, basically, when I sit there and go over their capital expenditures, they ask me, one of the other questions I get a lot is, can I hire? And then that actually moves us into what I do as a cash flow projection, based off schedule. And I think we briefly talked about this in my last podcast, but I go over the next 6 months and make sure the money coming down the pipeline can still fund our new employee. I can say, today you can afford to hire, and float them for 1 month. And what I mean by float is they are not billable for the first month. They're getting up and running. And then the next month after they've been hired, they should be billable at a certain rate. But this all comes down to having cash to fund that person for that first month. So I think that's also a really important concept to bring up, because I do get that question, Kim, can I hire, almost all the time, actually. I get it. And right now, there's such a need for mid-level designers for all my clients, especially in the West. I'm getting a lot. Do you know who's available? And I'm like, no, but you can afford it, Right. So and just remember, when you hire, that's a money maker. That should not drain. That should make you money, instead of you're taking on the expenditure, but you're billing them using what we call the multiplier, to cover your overhead, profit, and fund them. But they should be making you money, which means you have more work than you have staff. So it's really important to find that balance.
Okay.
I mean, that could be a whole nother episode. I could just go on and on and on.
Right. And I do think we did cover a little bit about in the other one. And I just want to one part of here that I want to take apart here is the clarity in what you're saying is that, first of all, you help them look 6 months of pipeline to see that there's work lined up and or potentially, pretty solidly coming in, not a wish project, but like we know it's coming in, right? And then secondly is that we need the cash on hand to fund whatever we're going to pay them in salary, payroll taxes, Social Security, disability, that entire package that we're going to pay them for 1 month. Expect to bear that burden for 1 month. But by the second month, whatever you are paying them, they should be producing in billable hours. In other words, they should be producing in billable hours a higher number than what you're paying them. But the point is, if they're going to work for you for 20 hours, they should be producing in billable hours their own salary, is what you're saying.
You're absolutely correct. I love the way you just put that. It's like you could be my spokesperson, which is why I'm doing this to begin with, because you put it in such great terms. That's exactly right.
Okay.
And I've had issues where some people have hired a designer and it's been months before they've turned a profit on them. And that's a sign that maybe that person doesn't fit.
And or you really didn't have enough work to justify the hire if you don't have enough billable hours, okay? Can I ask you a question that I think is subjective, and you tell me if it's an actual something that could be a factual answer, but I feel like it's subjective and I've heard different viewpoints on it and I'm curious yours. So often the business model is that, okay, I'm the principal and I bill out at $125 an hour, or I'm the principal and I bill out at $250 an hour, right? And my design assistant, whether it's a senior designer, a junior designer, whatever we want to call them, okay? It's not me, but it's somebody else that does billable work, okay? I have so often the model is, let's just use 175 for the principal and 125 for the second employee. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard that seems to be acceptable. Everybody, you very rarely find somebody that says, why are you doing it that way? But I have run into a couple of people. And of course, it's funny because I usually grab the name in my head when I bring up things like this, and I can't recall who it is. So if you're listening, believe me, I got it from you. But there's at least one or two people that have said to us, not for nothing, but anything that is required to get done on a design project, if it has to be done and your billable rate is 175 and your junior does it, it gets billed at 175 because if they didn't do it, you'd be doing it. And what about, and so finally, when I first heard that, I thought, I'm not sure how I feel. And then when they came back to me with, okay, Luann, how about this? How about your junior you have that person scheduled for 10 billable hours this coming week based on what needs to be done on a particular project, and they are sick the entire week and you do that work. Whose rate do you bill it at?
Okay, so I love this question.
Okay, good, because then I went, I don't know.
Okay, so just let me give you my overall viewpoint, and then we'll go into estimation.
Okay,
so this is my general response for if my designer's sick and I've got to make up that time. You've really got to look at, because let's use the 175 principal and the 125 designer. Okay, so if I have a principal that's covering for a designer, you need to bill that at 125, because if you bill that at 175, the client's paying for the fact that someone has the flu, and I don't think that's fair to the client.
Okay.
That's my overall viewpoint on that, but let's get deeper into this because I think it's more of an overall concept. And this goes back to my contracting days. I'll go, or even my architectural controller days, I'll go and look at what we bid that project out. So when you're looking at an estimate, I'm starting to use contractor terms, sorry. When you look at a project and you do a walkthrough and you come back and you sit there and you're like, okay, what am I thinking this is going to take me in hours? Obviously, you're thinking, okay, the principal has to do the meetings. There's certain things only the principal can do, okay? And then there's certain things that the designer can do. And I think it's important to stick to that concept where you say, okay, 40 hours at 125 and 10 hours at 175 to redo this living room. I don't know, depending on what's being done in that living room. And that's just design hours. I think it's important when you're putting in your time that you're looking at that compared to what you estimated the job at. And you don't necessarily share that with your client. That's internal only. But I think it really helps with the fact that if you get a time billing and there's someone returning product to a store or samples to a store and you bill that at 175, that's really going to make a client a little pissy, excuse my French. So, but you don't want the designer, if they're going to the meetings and replacing the principal, which I don't think should happen, that's obviously 175. So it's not necessarily, I think, who's doing the work, but what level the work is at.
Okay.
And literally that goes back to my general contracting days where we used to bid out labor, tradesmen, plumbing tradesmen, HVAC, because they're all at different billable rates. And some of them have to be certified and some of them don't. They're all different skill levels is my point. So it's just really important to be as transparent. If you're billing hourly to this client, and I've run into this issue where a client has accidentally billed a principal rate to do very basic design AutoCAD. And the client's like, why am I paying bleep, bleep, bleep for this basic function? That's outrageous. So it has come back to certain clients. And I said, well, you can't do that because you're basically saying it's twice what you thought it would be just to do basic design services.
Okay.
So you really have to be careful. And this is why you want to review your time billings with accuracy, that if you do have someone that's sick for a week or you're low staffed and you have to cover, you don't want to bill at that principal rate.
Okay. And I would just say, just devil's advocate, okay, whether I fully agree with you or not. And I think I do. for the most part, like you make good points. The point that I heard that you make is why does a client pay, why does a client get harmed if an employee is sick? Like when you put it that way, it's like, right, it wasn't the client's fault that the employee is sick. It wasn't your fault either, but the budget is, and then the second point is the budget is the budget. So I feel like why I can live with that is because it violates an initial agreement. That's why I feel like I can buy that logic, because if I have set up my project with my client and I've said, when I work on your project, it's 175, and when my designer works on your project, it's 125. It's a violation of that initial agreement because I've worked on it because they're sick, right? I've still have agreed to a certain thing, and now somebody being sick shouldn't negate that agreement. Okay, so I'm there with that. The only other thing, and I'm there with that, you figure out a total budget of hours, and you don't necessarily have to break it down when you do your proposal, but you've already decided that 40 hours of design and any revisions could possibly be 10 hours, and I'm definitely going to task my designer with revisions, and so I'm going to build 10 hours at 125. On board with all of it. Here's my only caveat. If you were working with a designer, Kim, who said to you, well, you can tell me that all day long, but I've been doing it this way and it works, and my clients pay it, like, what do you say to that?
Go for it.
Okay, hey, that's what I'm saying too. Okay.
Okay, so let's get some.
If it ain't fixed, don't break it. I mean, if it ain't broken, don't fix it, right? Whatever it is.
The first thing that came to mind was money, money, money. Hey, everybody out there, if you can get away with building a principal rate, and here, Luann, so this is really good that you brought this up, because if you're a one-person show and you build nothing but this principal rate, go for it.
Right.
I mean,
that's right. I think that's where it came from. I think that's where it started from. It was like, look, I was 175, 8 hours a day until I hired somebody else, and now all of a sudden it's got to be 125. Like, and I want everybody to hear me. I think I'll speak for you just a moment. You clarify if I'm overstepping, but I don't think that I'm saying that you should bill your designer at the same rate as yourself. But what I'm saying is, if you are the person I've spoken to at a live event and is doing it, I'm not saying stop it either. Right?
Well, I think it's how you prepare your client.
That's what it is.
It's what.
It's like everything. It's what are the agreements. That's exactly right. What are the agreements? And here's the thing. It's not just what the agreements are. It's what can you own, right? When you own an argument, if you own a position, if you own the rationalization from it, it's like what I say all the time: know what you will do and what you will not do, and nobody can take you off of that. So when you do a presentation to a client and you say, you know what, we all bill at 175 here, take it or leave it, go ahead, buy.
Exactly. I mean, that's the whole onboarding process, and I'm a big proponent, and I've had this since my construction days, of whatever the contract says goes, because that's transparency. And if they start complaining halfway through the project, oh, my time billings are high, I'm like, well, we went over this on your onboarding process, and this was what we discussed. Now, there could be a point where you didn't do that onboarding process, which does happen. And I always tell my clients, you need to do a better job you're the expert. You have to explain to them how this is going to go. If there's upfront design fees before they see results, that's just part of the process. But you can't just bill them all these huge time billings at the beginning of the project. And if they complain because you didn't prepare them for that, that's not necessarily their fault. You have to explain to them, this is how a project gets done. This is how something gets designed.
It's so true.
I just think being upfront and straightforward and having a schedule with your client and a proper onboarding is such a huge thing. I mean, I talk about it all the time. So,
well, and the thing is, I have said it like, ad nauseam on the podcast, is that whatever it is that we do for a living, we know it so well that we don't even see the parts of what we do that somebody else on the outside doesn't understand. And that's 90% of where the problems come in. When we take for granted, it's like what I said about you in the beginning of the show, in the introduction to the show. It's that you know this inside and out, but you've learned that you need to feed it to us non-financial people in a way that meets us where our brain grabs it, right? If you just came in here and did all geeky finance can't speak, we'd be like, whatever, Kim, I'm fine with not knowing. You know what I mean? So one thing I want to go back to is the cost to be open number. Because I do talk about this with designers a lot in when I am meeting with them on one-on-one coaching and group coaching. Give us a list from your standpoint of the things that we should be considering in a cost to be open number.
So payroll's one of them. Insurance, monthly insurance, if you're doing a monthly payment or if you did a yearly payment, that's always important.
And that's all insurances. It's health insurance, it's car insurance, it's all of the insurances. It's payroll insurance, it's all of disability, all of that, right?
Yeah. Rent, any outside services such as accounting or HR services. Marketing, not necessarily, because that's what I consider a variable. One thing that's not included that I think people forget is any kind of owner draw to the owner of the company that doesn't run through an income statement. Basically, what that is you're not, when the owner of the company pulls money out of the company to pay themselves, that's an owner draw for those that don't know what that means. Yeah. So basically, those are the standards. Rent,
and then
insurance.
we also have, the gas, electric utilities. We also have any software platforms that we have monthly memberships to, right?
Yeah.
QuickBooks, My Doma Studio, whatever they are, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of other things that we have. I mean, we put in there, we've got 5 vans on the road. Some are owned, some are not, right? But we have an idea of what the gas is going to be. And so we put that in there. So we know that generally between the 5 installers, me, my husband, that gas, an Amex bill for gas is going to be, $1 billion. So, even though that is a variable, when you're in it and you watch your finances, even for a 3-month cycle, you can project what that's going to be, right?
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Anything that's a reoccurring that has nothing to do with your projects that you've taken on.
Right. That's a good way to define it.
Yeah. And again, I just want to emphasize you don't want to include marketing or advertising for that, just because that is a variable.
Right.
But anything that outside services, those accountants that need to be, don't forget your accounting staff.
Right.
Everything in line for you. And I'm trying to think, I'm just running through an income statement in my head. Like you said, any auto payments, any parking for those companies in big cities, you have parking allowances. I have San Francisco has a parking ticket allowance. Like you said, rent, utilities, anything related to keeping your office open. Regardless.
Right. Like if you own your studio, maybe you have a landscaper that comes. We have a window washer that comes.
Cleaner.
Yep. The housekeeping that may come in and do your studio every 2 weeks or something like that. These are all the little nudgy things that could add up if you don't consider them and you just don't make it part of your monthly nut as you described it.
Right.
And I know that for us at Window Works, and we're a mature business, 30 plus years, right? We do decide every year in December what our advertising budget is going to be for the next calendar year. We do an autopsy based on all of the advertising and marketing that we did the year before. We sit there as a team. We evaluate from the statistical, I'm horrible at that word, statistical viewpoint of what actually made the phone ring, but then we also do that feel. We do the conversation where it says, well, the computer says that we got, 42 leads from this magazine and that converted into X amount of dollars. But then we also discuss it, like love it, don't like it. These are the kind of clients that it generated. Maybe they weren't you might have got 42 clients, but we didn't like 30 of them, that sort of a thing. And then we do attach a budget to the year and we do put that in our cost to be open number, but almost more like we know it's not a diehard have to. Like if we were to start to see signs of recession, cancel, don't even say that word. But if we were to start to see it, that's one of the first places that we're going to be like, okay, pull, not necessarily, and I shouldn't say that. Marketing is not the first thing that we're going to pull if we see signs of the R word, by the way. Okay, just let's be serious. We want to maintain as much customer and intake as we can. But I'm just saying we know right away that that's not a hard and fast mortgage payment, right?
Right. And it's okay to bring up the R word. I say recession almost every single month.
Cancel. As long as you say it, cancel afterwards.
This is what my biggest piece of advice for the R word is to open a line of credit and don't use it.
Oh my God. I have that in my first book. It's exactly this. You have to have the line of credit and you have to not use it. Although you do have to use it a tiny bit, because if you don't use it at all, then they tell you don't need it and they take it away from you.
Yeah.
So
you could just like pay something and then pay it off right away just to get some activity. But the line of credit is what I encourage everybody to get. And just keep, it's not a loan. Some people think it's a loan. It's just an open balance of number. If you need it, you can pull from it.
Absolutely.
And then the cash projections, when the jobs start to taper off, is another sign. So it's just important it's not a fun thing to approach, but in my business, I have to it's in the forefront of my mind, cancel all the time.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Let's take a few minutes, because I've recently had, coincidentally, 2 emails in the last, say, 4 months that requested that we talk about recession, cancel. And so the thing is that I was I've thought, well, that's a good idea, but who am I going to talk about it with? So, hello, Kimberly. So let's take a moment here, because, and I don't want to bring it, to this big, draggy, long out discussion. Just, I know the first couple of things that we do personally at Window Works when we start to see the storm clouds. Okay. And so, but I'm curious, let's have a little comparison of the types of things that you suggest to your clients that they do when you see and start to hear grumblings of the thunder.
Well, when I start to see it, I see it in the cash flow projections first and foremost. And then over a 2-month period, if I see the cash is not being replenished, that's a second sign. And the cash flow is still not being replenished. So that means when I say replenished, there isn't any additional work in the pipeline over a 1 to 2 month period. And then, but the cash reserves start to decrease and haven't been replenished by time billings, because we weren't able to hit utilization rates because we don't have the work. So it's all of that together. And at that time, before we even dig into the line of credit, we have a discussion of, do we need to lay off staff? As hard as that is, my history in construction, architecture, and interior design, the biggest expenditure you have is rent and staff. So you start to lay off your staff, and then you maintain where you are with your current level of projects. If it still starts to decrease your workload, then we look at it again. But the thing is not to get to the month where your line of credit is maxed out and then you start to lay off staff. It's a hard thing for everyone to do, and I'm really sorry to bring it up because it's not a happy thing to talk about. But this is your business. This is your livelihood. I know plenty of designers that made it through 2008 because they cut back on their staff and just maintained.
Right.
So your monthly net decreases. You reanalyze all your numbers. It's not a happy time. And I've actually done it with a couple clients that have really struggled not during a recession, but they just couldn't get work and we had to lay off staff. And I feel horrible having to discuss it, but they hate laying off their staff. But I just try to hold their hand through the process because it is not fun.
Yeah. So the thing is, Kim, I hear you on that. And of course, we've been in that position of having to lay off staff. And I just share with you, we have been through, I always forget if it's 4 recessions at Window Works. I think it's 4. And in my first book, I described how the first one almost took us out because we did ignore the signs. We did ignore the thunder and the storm clouds in the distance. And we were both, Vin and I, our glass is half full people. We are also not only glasses half full people, but we are also this personality that just is like, look, I'm going to get it done. Like, I don't care what it takes. I'm going to get it done. And so I have to say that ended up being the Achilles heel for us going into that first recession because we wanted to believe that we could just power through it and be okay. And we ultimately made a pivot and had a solution that ended up being the thing that saved us. And we were at the 6-year point in, maybe we were 11-year point in business, and we were able to come through it because we went 11 or 12 years without hitting any financial rough spot other than the startup, which is rough. Okay. But with each recession since then, we have learned. And when I tell you to watch my husband in action when we faced that 2008 recession was remarkable, because it was probably January of the year where October was the like the big bump, right? And in that January, he starts saying to me, we got to do something here. We got to do something. We got a lot of overhead. We got a lot of people. We got a lot of And I'm like, yeah, but it'll be fine. You know what I'm saying? And I knew enough then to know that we can't just put our head in the sand. But what we do first line of defense is he gets into every single expense and cuts all of the fat away. And so when I say first line of defense, I mean when the pundits start using the word. And the pundits start using the word, and it becomes not just one guy, standing there in the middle of the country being, the boy who cried wolf. But when it really is like, it's not that now. I'm not feeling like that in the economy now. Nobody's like, so we're not in the mode that I'm talking about. But when the mode when it gets there, right, Kim?
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
And so at that first line of defense, when I just mentioned how much money we spend on the Amex and gas. So now first line of defense. He turns around and we have a meeting with everybody that has a gas card. Okay, here's the thing. We're done with, running in circles. We're done with this. You got to make this amount of gas work for the week. Like, figure it out. Stop leaving stuff in the garage. Stop going back and forth to the same appointment 3 times. Lock it down. Okay.
Yep.
And
Yep.
things like that. And then it would be little things. I'm going to tell you what, I have suggested this to designers that I've coached. Do you know that the little silly things that you don't think about, like your phone bill? I don't care what phone company it is. It is a crazy, insidious thing about phone companies. You can sign up in 2018 for this amazing plan, and because you have 16 people on it, you've got this rate. But you don't even know it. But in 2019, they switched it, and that plan is not a plan anymore. Now you just have 16 people on a bill. But if you switched it to this plan, you'd cut $70 or $80 a month. But they don't call you up and say, hey, we got a new way for you to save money. I had a coaching client that I said to this person, go right to your Verizon bill, go right to your Sprint bill, whatever it is. Do you know that they came back and said to me, I'm going to save $750 this year just because I made a phone call and found out that I could have been on a different plan?
Yep.
You start doing that with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 line items, your health insurance, your car insurance, are you getting the best rate of this? Sometimes you just have to ask, how about calling the Amex and the Visa and saying, you know what, I want another 0.5% off.
Yeah, they'll do that.
That's the truth.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's what he spends the first 2 or 3 months doing, chopping and dicing and skimming the fat on everything so that maybe we're going to go another 3 or 4 months. And I have to say, in 2008, we ultimately did have to lay off an employee. And it was gut-wrenching. Okay.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we didn't have to do that until October when, everybody, and we also were, when we did it and we'd made all these other moves, we turn around and we came right, we didn't miss a beat in revenue, in net profits. We just went right through and actually did a renovation of the showroom at the tail end before it was even over, because I said to my husband, you know how many people in our business in our industry, window treatments, went out of business in the last year and a half? I said, when the new ones open up in another year because the recession is over, they're going to have brand new studios. And I want ours to be the best looking one. So we ended up spending money during that time, not the first year and a half, but in the second year and a half. And so I feel like, when somebody says to me, could you talk about recession? What do we do? Is, to your point, don't wait until there's no money. You're maxed out on your credit cards, you're maxed out on your line of credit, and now you're like, chopping off arms and legs to survive. Get a trim, get a haircut first, get your nails clipped,
Yes.
you know what I mean? Clip the crap that doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I like what your husband's doing annually, regardless if you're in a recession, trim the fat.
Oh, he does it every year.
I think that's great. And then also I want to say, you want to build at least 3 to 6 months of your monthly net in your cash.
Yes.
So you want to build your cash reserves to help you get through those difficult times, because we're on a plan of what we call project money revenue. It comes in by project, and everyone knows, regardless of a recession, we have peaks and valleys. That surplus of cash that you have, that you saved up, will get you through the valleys.
Right.
So it's just really important to remember that. And then, it eventually will happen, but I have to just give a little tip that I want to hand over to everybody. My tax professor in my master's program said, one way to see a recession coming is to look at the increase. If the unemployment benefits start to increase, that's typically a sign.
Do you mean in our actual payroll stubs you mean that they fluctuate and they collect more out of us during that? Or do you mean just in the newspapers and they're saying this?
In the newspapers, if you go, the ADP every quarter releases payroll earnings, and sometimes if they'll put on TV. I stream CNBC every day, all day. And I just look at the patterns. It's all about patterns. But one time when they say, unemployment benefits have increased, that means more people are filing for unemployment benefits.
Understood.
Not that they're filing like they're not looking for a job. They literally are taking more out of the government because they need money.
Because there's more people collecting unemployment.
Yes.
Understood.
My tax professor always stuck with me, and that was back in the early 2000s that he put that in my brain. And I've always watched that number.
That's very good. Yeah, I like that. It is. It's very telling. I would say to you, though, that that's probably even 3 to 5 months before the storm clouds have started, right? Because by the time they have that data and they've got that analyzed and now it's out to the world on the news, it's been happening.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what I'm really trying to hammer home is it's that first inkling, because here's the thing, human nature, we don't necessarily, even as somebody as intentional as my husband is with our finances, he knows when we're fat and everything is rolling, he's not nearly as strict as he could be. Simple things like these are how basic level he will get. He actually says to Adriana, I want you to do a complete inventory on all supplies on hand, staples, pens, notebooks, all of this crap that, she orders whenever she feels like it. She doesn't need permission to put a Staples order in. We see the guy coming through with the gurney, every 6 weeks, and there's 19 boxes of paper and, magic markers and everything else. And, there's times when I will open up the supply cabinet and I'll be like, there's 40 markers in here. Why did we just get more markers? Right. But, when things are fat and things are crazy, you don't turn around and call her out on it. Right. But that's what he did. Little things like that. I want you to have an inventory. We are not ordering one package of packing tape until we are down to 2 rolls.
That's actually really smart. And actually restaurants, it's called inventory of product. And that's why restaurants go out of business, because they order too much inventory of product and it goes bad and they lose it.
Right.
So
right.
Your husband is very wise.
He's brilliant. He is.
Yeah.
But these are the things, and this is what I wanted to say to the couple of people that have emailed me, is that to your point, you do not wait until, the sky is falling. But to my husband's point, there are probably at least 20 places that you can tighten up that will not bother your day-to-day one bit, and cumulatively could save you anywhere from $500 a month to $3,000 a month, depending on how big your business is. Because I know businesses at our level, like I said, we're probably pissing away $3,000 a month half the time. We're probably not because of Vinny, but maybe it's $1,000.
I love his name is Vinny. That's awesome. Benny should come do a podcast with you about trimming the fat.
I know, right? So anyway, well, you know what, Kim, I think this is awesome, and I appreciate all your help. And I have to say, I think that you really are going to have to come and get this PDF, this PowerPoint that Kim has given us, because we talked about it, but there's a lot more that you can go through with the whole thing here, and it will help you. And just look for it in the show notes for this podcast of how you're going to access that, because I have to talk to Nicole and Christy on how we're going to do that. I have the slightest idea, but we're going to figure that out for you so that you can access it. And but it'll be in the show notes, and we'll put it in the Instagram and the Facebook post on how you access it when you see the show listed. So Kim, just tell us how we reach you if they want to know more about your services and working with you.
Yeah, I have a scheduling link on my website. My website is KMMSF. That's short for San Francisco, because that's where I left my heart. So KMMSF.com. If you go to contact us and click on schedule, you can sign up for a free 1-hour session to see if what I can provide you is going to be beneficial. And my phone number is on there, or you can just shoot me an email at Kimberly@KMMSF.com. Awesome.
That's amazing that you do a free 1-hour consult. That's amazing. That's the price of admission right there. Just right. Like seriously, your phone is going to be ringing if you're going to have scheduling off the hook. Because why wouldn't you do it? Right? I mean, why wouldn't you? There's no reason not to. Just see, even if you're feeling pretty confident, how about a checkup, right? It's I love it. Awesome. So generous of you. Thank you. All righty. Well, you have an excellent day, Kimberly. I appreciate it so much. And everybody out there, I hope you decide to be excellent today. There's a lot of information here that you can take and run with. And you just have to find one thing that you can do that will move your business and help you feel more confident about running your business and help you make more money doing it, right? So, guys, decide to be excellent. Thank you so much for joining me again today. This podcast is a production of WindowWorks, your resource for custom window treatments and awnings. To learn how we can help you on your next interior design project, go to www.windowworks-nj.com. And if you're interested in working with me on your business, either through masterminds or one-on-one coaching, or you want to know how to get my book, The Making of a Well-Designed Business, or you just want to know what's going on in the podcast land and where I'm going to be, all of that is found at luannigara.com. Thank you so much. Have an excellent day.